Well, thanks all for coming. So I'm Tomas Rawlings, and I'm creating this panel, but really the people I want to hear from are here and will yourselves, so there'll be a time for discussions from the audience. So I'm really happy to have with us Jan, who is part of the Shadowrun Online team, who successfully managed to raise over $500,000 to fund that project, and also Alex from the Tangiers, which we'll get an update on how you're doing in just a moment.
I'm from the German-Austrian studio called Cliffhanger Productions. We specialize in turn-based games, very much like my colleague to the right. And we've recently done Jagged Alliance online, and we've done a successful Kickstarter for Shadowrun Online, which we are currently producing. But since there's another Shadowrun online game out there, we've waited for it. So they can get their game out before. Myself, I've been in the games industry for about 20 years. Feel old. I'm teaching games culture and game design at university. I'm part of running the studio, and I've been mostly active in the creative part and the business development, which usually don't go together well. But I'll try to sort of combine those conflicting interests. Yeah, that's about me.
I'm a complete opposite. I threw away a career in retail about a year ago to work on making games, and that's led up to our Kickstarter drive on Tangiers, which has about 25 minutes ago passed its goal.
I think a round of applause, well done.
And yes, there's not much else.
And what was your goal then?
My goal, it was quite a low one, it was 35,000. A bumpy journey there. It's been one of the most terrifying and anxiety-ridden periods in my recent life.
Well, I think actually, sort of, we talked about possible stuff on us, but this sort of brings me something to it, which is one of the things that I think sort of worries me slightly about doing this. So I designed a game called Call of Cthulhu: The Wasteland, and we considered going to Kickstarter in the early days when it was still a newer thing. This is a couple of years ago. And since there's been quite a lot of Cthulhu projects now, but one of the things is you very publicly put yourself up for success or failure. I mean, how does that feel going into it, saying, here's my idea, here's what I want to do, give me your money, or let me fall flat on my face for all to see?
I mean, we've gotten into our 500K around 4 hours, I think, before the time ran out. And we were off to an abysmal start, because we did a couple of cardinal errors on Kickstarter, assuming that people would like free-to-play because it's there for everyone to share, when in fact it meant evil Facebook-style game and we kill you. So yeah, I can totally. I don't. It's not even the fact that you're up there for success or failure. It's like every little thing comes under scrutiny. I'm obviously not British or American. My company is in Austria, which for Americans is like Azerbaijan. That's like some strange country over there.
Kangaroos there, no?
Yeah, it's like they don't even were clear on the fact that we could do games. Like technically, we're able to do that, and they told us so on YouTube, on Twitter, on emails, on the comments.
So you mean like I'm interested in supporting your game, but can you guys even make games?
Yes, they was like, you can't even speak proper English. How can you make a game? And and of course there's all that expectation of you. We've got a license that was beloved and cherished by a lot of people, and automatically, because we were not from there or not from wherever they live, we were gonna fuck up the license. That was like, that's one of the first things they said. You're gonna kill the license. You're gonna make bad stuff with it. And we were like, guys, you didn't even listen to the video like for 30 seconds. And people actually made that decision in split seconds. I mean, they made the decision to not like us in 15 seconds. We can prove it by the data that we've got from like how long did they watch the YouTube video, and it's really hard. So on top of that anxiety, whether you're going to succeed or fail,
right,
you actually need to be able to, if you do anything, you really need to be able to stick to your convictions. You need to be friendly to those people because they potentially might give you money and make it possible, so you can't offend them. But on the other hand, as sort of personal integrity, it's going down the drain immediately if you just roll over and say, yeah, we'll do everything you want.
So how did you turn it around? So you're at the start of the Kickstarter, you've got this ambitious goal, you've got this, you really want to make it, and it starts out terribly. What did you lot do in order to make it so actually you did make your money and quite a substantial goal?
Well, we've got a special situation which isn't typical because we've got that license, and there's a twofold thing with it because like Jordan Weissman, the original inventor of Shadowrun, came out with his Shadowrun Returns project prior to us. Now, when we started out having that idea around sort of the same time that you did, we, not being an American company at that time, Kickstarter was only available to American companies or for people that have a person in America. It took us some time to set it up. And then we called Jordan and said, we're going to make a Shadowrun game because we licensed it. He knows we licensed it from his company at that time. And can you give us an endorsement? He was like, oh, I'm going to go Kickstarter as well. And it's like, what the fuck for Shadowrun? It's like, what the fuck? And it turns out he's got part of the license, we've got the other part of the license, and we decided at the same time to do the Kickstarter. And at that moment, we could either have competed, which would be tremendously silly, and then I said, okay, obviously you're the creator, so you're going to go first. And he made 1.8 million, basically being the creator of Shadowrun. And then we followed up, and immediately people went like, oh, you're trying to cash in on Jordan's success. And we was like, no, it's like, I can tell the story all the time, as often as I want. Nobody was going to believe me that we actually, I can prove my Kickstarter thing that we submitted the Kickstarter before he did. That's nobody's interested in that in a 15-second blurb on YouTube or on Twitter. So we have that sort of. It gave us some leeway we wouldn't have otherwise because we had a license. People wanted it. People were willing to trust us to a degree, or certain people were. And on the other hand, it really fucked us up. And what we did is we communicated with everyone personally because it was clear that we wouldn't be able to get the message out in a short video because people didn't listen to it or look for it.
So let me take that.
We had an actual, like the ratio we've got 6,000 backers, and we've got one of the highest per head ratio of investment of Kickstarter backing. It's like $93 or $94 per backer. And the average is like 70, 45, depending on the type of project. And we've got 6,000 backers, and we've got about 12,000 pieces of communication. We've got 6 people that continually communicate with everybody. And we, on average per backer, every backer we sort of personally answered twice. And that's what we did.
So how many people did you have to communicate with to get to down, so I'm assuming, so you had 6,000 people you had to directly communicate with, and then on average 12,000. There must have been more messages going out to potential backers.
Yeah.
So how many people did you actually speak to during the duration, would you estimate, of the campaign to get those 6,000 people to get the money?
I know that we had sort of the unique users that we've been addressing with email and phone communications. That's about 15,000. And then, of course, we did YouTube videos and stuff that went out to a whole lot of people that we can't really know whether they've been listening. But we've been out in the forums. We've been out in Shadowrun fan forums. We've been working with a Catalyst, the guys that do the tabletop role-playing game. We've been in their forums. We've actually 3 months prior to doing the Kickstarter, we've started to invest into going into the forums, showing ourselves, making ourselves known, and sort of getting street credibility. Yeah.
Well, I'll come back to that in a minute because I think it's an important point on because we can talk a little bit about what you're doing. But so basically the planning for this and the actual not just the planning, but the actual groundwork of communications started months before anyone knew about it. So you're from a different scope. You created this new IP, no existing thing, new to the industry. How did you manage to get enough interest?
Well, it was terrifying at first because I was bracing myself for an onslaught of criticism coming from, look at all these ideas, oh no, he has nothing to do with the industry, he's going to fail. But we got the opposite. We had almost unanimous support and enthusiasm, which really did the project well. It drove a strong necessity of discipline and responsibility to our backers in actually going forwards and delivering it. On terms of the level of communication, following on from the volume of it, that we did a little calculation halfway into the project, and just from thank yous alone, we'd written the equivalent of a 375-page novel.
So I think we established one of the key things is definitely going to be you need to communicate with people and a lot, and novels worth. So when you were doing the Shadowrun online Kickstarter, what did you do in that planning stage? So before publicly anyone knew about it, so you went to the forums, you started doing it. What other stuff did you do in prep before that took such a long time?
Well, for us, it was the technicality of actually being able to apply for the Kickstarter in the US. So we set up a US company, US bank account. We found a US citizen to insert his social security number and stuff like that. So that's sort of the whole technical thing.
Do you still have to do that?
Not if you're in the UK, because you've got Kickstarter in the UK now. You still have to do it for the US, yes.
Right.
And it's been getting a lot easier, but it's still quite, like at the time, nobody could tell us, for example, whether, like, what sort of tax would apply. Because is it a donation, or is it a pre-sale? Is it a product that you're selling, or is it people giving you money to do something? And even all that stuff we need to clarify, because it makes a huge difference whether you pay 20% of whatever you make on Kickstarter or whether you don't, on top of the 10% that you pay to Amazon and Kickstarter. So that was part of it. We needed to create a video, which fortunately one of our designers is a cameraman. But we tried to do a lot of artwork, and we actually created from the Jaguar Alliance engine, we created a level that we could show off so people could get an idea about what the game would look like. So we did. It's not a real prototype, but it was about 8 weeks of work, I think, for a small team of 4 to 5 people, and that's mostly stuff that we tried for.
So you say of your small team, you're basically full time for 3 months before this, doing that. And Alex, how about you? How much time did you put in preparation for your run?
I think it was about 2.5 months solid straight before, but then part-time in the long run-up just to see what sort of ecosystem and what was actually going on with Kickstarter. And that was 2 months of solid data pooling for various backeteers of other projects, what people went for, average pledges, so we could get a rough ground of where to position ourselves when we actually executed it. And we did that quite well, because from what we observed and what we predicted has matched so far entirely what has actually happened, which is very important, because when you actually click submit, you're jumping into the unknown, and you have to know that you're doing it right. Probably 2 of those weeks was just going over what we've already done to make sure psychologically that we are happy about what we're going into.
So you basically looked at other projects within the same sort of genre you were aiming to see how much they'd asked for, how much they'd received, and so you were basically learning from what they'd done and not done before you even started. So that was a key part of your preparation.
Yeah.
And did you do a similar thing, Jan?
At that time, there weren't too many projects about. Actually, it was back when there was a lot of like total one-man indie shows, things that were great ideas, but ran in a completely different mindset, I think, with regards to the backers. And there was a couple of the more professional ones, like the Tim Schafer as like the first guy to do it. Then there was Jordan, and at the time we were one of the top 10 funded Kickstarters in games ever. By now we've been way back, but there weren't too much, there wasn't too much data, and people they weren't sure how to best build your inventory with regards to the backing levels. There wasn't the received wisdom, and there wasn't even like how to currently there's sort of there's on Kickstarter there's a certain format developing for doing this. And when we did it, there wasn't. We did a lot of data research, but there was just conflicting data because the sample was just too small.
So I think we're interested to get to this. So would you both say that the 3 months of planning-ish, 2.5, 3 months of planning preparation work you did before, did that in hindsight turn out to be the right amount, not enough, too much?
The right amount, yeah.
About the right amount?
Absolutely. I think anybody who's going to go into it, the 3 months gives you a couple of, first of all, it allows you to actually do a proper presentation, which is quite important. It allows you to check your ideas and, and you can also do a lot of thinking. I mean, like mentally preparing for that. Because once you start submit, it's going to be, no matter how large or small your project is, like there's a chance of failure, of total failure, which obviously means nobody's interested in you. That means you haven't got communication. But if there's anything happening with your project that's in some way positive, and it doesn't correlate necessarily with the amount of money you get. You can have like 5,000 people giving you $5 quid, and it's still going to be 5,000 people you're going to work for. There is like the next weeks will be the most hellish and interesting and challenging ride that you've ever had.
It's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talk about the logistics of it, but not so much that psychological prep for it.
We've got a team of by now they're about 30 people in the office. Like every morning, everybody first thing they do is check it. Like every hour, everybody's like, where's the score? What are people saying? And not only checking the sum because that's easy. They're checking like what's the tracking on KickTrack versus other product. Are we number 2 or are we on 1 now? Number 3. What people are saying on Twitter, and it's like the whole company was breathing it. Like even my wife and my kids were like, "What's your Kickstarter doing, Pappy?" And I was like, "I don't know. I've just woken up, but let's look." And it's dictating your every movement. We actually our production, even for the rest of the team that weren't on the Kickstarter task force, the rest of the team, I think the production got like this because most of the time they spent worrying about the Kickstarter.
So we've got 3 months prep time. If we bring it up to the actual launch now, so we launch, the project's out, it's going. How much time are you spending? Are you done then? Can you launch and I can just sit back for that month and watch the money roll in? No. I mean, how much time at that point do you need to devote to it? And how much? You've obviously talked a lot about the amount of communication. So how much time went into doing that? Would you? How much on Shadowrun? So we're in that month. In
the first phase.
My time is quite literally wake up, computer's on, I've got notifications on the Kickstarter page, Twitter search for Tangiers, KickTrack, reload all the tabs, have a look at what's happening, and then that's the same thing I go to sleep to. And I think I've actually left the house, this is probably the 3rd time I've left the house since the project has launched.
Right, so prepare to basically live like the zombie apocalypse in your house, don't go out.
Have someone to fetch your food for you and buy your smokes.
But it's literally that. I mean, we had 2 people in the US that were gracious enough to help us do the community work because we're in a different time zone, and we had a 24-hour roundabout thing going on. But these 2 people in the US weren't available all the time, so a couple of our guys had to stay, do 24-hour shifts actually. In order to be able to communicate, because otherwise people go, like on Kickstarter there's one thing, the comment section, which is quite important. Once it's down the page, it's on the next page and nobody reads it, and people get really pissed because nobody's answering to their questions or comments or whatever. So there's a, depending on how much traffic you've got, there's a time slot between a window of opportunity. Maybe for us it was about half an hour to 20 minutes. If we hadn't answered anything in that period, it would have gone down. And people would come back and see their answer not being there, and they would get pissed. And Kickstarter is a weird way of sorting the comments. It's not really by the exact time that people enter it. So we had to make sure that we'd always be there to read the comments immediately when they are given. And the same goes for Twitter. I mean, anybody Twitter feeds, you need to.
So is it fair to say that the people commenting either on the site or on Twitter, they're basically asking a question with the intention, if they get the answer they want, they're about to give you some money, and if you don't meet that window, you're potentially losing a backer?
Well, on the comment section, you can only get into it when you actually backed. So that means you've already spent $1,
right,
or whatever the minimum amount is, which is sort of keeping the worst stuff out. But then they're just going to bombard you on some other venue. And of course, everybody goes like, I would spend $1,000 if I knew this was good. It's like, yeah, but you're not, because you're already haggling. It's like, but for the $1,000, I also want blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'm not going to do a one-on-one haggling thing unless you pay $100,000, because that's the amount of cost that's associated with the idea. But of course, everybody feels entitled to it. And then when they backed, they feel even more entitled. And there's really 2 types of backers. And I think the more indie the product gets, the better off you are actually with your backers, because these people really support the idea. Whereas the larger the project gets, and we are somewhere in the middle, the more people it's just a pre-sale. It's just like, I've paid $50, I want my game now. It's like, but it's an idea at that stage. It's just an idea, and everybody wants an influence. Everybody wants a say in it. And if you don't do exactly what they say, or what they think is right, and what somebody else thinks is completely the opposite, of course, then they get really pissed. And this is what's taking, because coming back to the questions, is what's taking a lot of the time now. We still have 2 people dedicated, not full day, but fully dedicated in terms of the customer support and customer management. You need to write updates regularly, because people rightfully want to know where their money went. You've got a lot of emails. We still, I mean, on the positive side, we still make about 10 to 15,000 euro. So that's what 10,000 pounds a month from people backing us, to PayPal or whatever other sources, because there's still people coming in, and we've been trying to do everything to get seen, and still to this day, people 6 months, 9 months after come and say, "I've never heard of that Shadowrun thing you're doing. Why didn't you tell anybody?" It's like, we tried, really tried.
So no, but that's interesting. 9 months after, you're still making 10k a month.
Yeah.
In pledges and donations, even though the final goal has come. So that must now come quite a significant part of your operation, is the post-release.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of communication going on there. We've got the established fans, we still have new fans, and there's like the repetitive questions every day. Will I be able to play this, or what's it going to look like, and play it on my machine? So there's a sort of classic, as if the game were out, customer management with FAQs and everything. But there's always also people, we've got high-end backers. We've got backers that have paid $10,000, and they get an extra treatment because they want sort of a personal level contact, which means we need to be more active. And usually, if you develop a game, until you're going to some sort of public launch or PR point, you can still develop very much in quiet. I mean, maybe there's a publisher there that gets on your nerves, but by and large, it's a quiet thing. And we need to think differently. We need to think about how much can we give out? Now, how much is enough? How much is too much? What's too early? We've got a great idea for skills. We changed the system due to a technical reason, but everybody loved the skills idea in the first place, and we gave it out, and now we need to do something with the tech, which we usually wouldn't have done, because we usually would have said, it's a good idea, but it's too much work, so let's do it differently. And there's all kinds of stuff that sort of sticks to whatever you do.
So it's not. So I'd always had this very naive vision then that you've got that creative freedom. You raise the money on Kickstarter, you got the money. There's no publisher breathing down your neck demanding that, and you just go. But you're developing in the public gaze ever more.
Yeah. It's like 10,000 little publishers, in the very nice publishers, and people that are sympathetic and people that love the game. But we all know if there's an intense love for something, it's quite hard to manage, because then you've got to manage expectations. And of course, we've had that discussion when we entered the room. There's the other Shadowrun product, which is a great game, but people thought it would be the best game ever. And you can't be the best game ever, no matter how much money you raise on Kickstarter. It's always going to come down to some level of reality that people didn't invest in. They invested in their dreams, they invested in nostalgia, they invested in hope. And now you give them some sort of reality.
Well, if I could come to then, so one of the things that strikes me is, again, you look at the big successful Kickstarters, the Tim Schafer one, he's already got a name, he's already got a load of followers, that's the easy thing. So, what would you say the top tips then are for how do you get those people? How do you get those backers? How do you get people to sign up? How do you get people to even look at you? What were you doing on Tangiers to get people from starting from nowhere to actually pay attention in the first place?
We approach that, we've got two approaches, one intended and the other came about quite naturally. And the intended one was spread the net widely and get features on the news websites, which is the obvious way to go about it. That's been a bit of a struggle because quite a few editors are getting weary of more and more Kickstarter projects. But underneath that has been our supporters who we've brought on board and have become engaged through the level of communication, and then go and sort of suggest to the editors who've overlooked us, and then we get the boost from them, which is a sort of two-pronged approach.
So so when people do sign up, then you basically recruit them to the Tangiers army and send them off?
Not directly. We've never said sort of go and spam notch and get them to retweet us.
Right.
But, we start off with a thank you message to everyone, and then if they reply, we'll carry on the conversation. Likewise, on Twitter, reply to every message we get and just be earnest and expose yourself to them, because they're putting their faith in you, so you owe them that much. And that has brought people on board rather than a direct recruitment. It's been the natural process.
I think that's actually, when we looked at our Kickstarter, the vast majority of backers came either through Kickstarter, which means they got recommended in some way, they came through KickTrack, or they came through Facebook or Twitter or social networks. Rock Paper Shotgun, which is I think our largest driving site, or was at that time, has less than 3%, is responsible for less than 3% of the direct people that we could track come in. Now it might be that they read on Rock Paper Shotgun and then went to Kickstarter and got somewhere around, so we can't track the exact way. But I don't think, apart from the few very large projects, press is going to save you anymore. It's not. There's just too many Kickstarter projects out there. It's just they get fed up. They get tired of it. There's a couple of sites dedicated to weekly Kickstarter updates. They feature like 3 or 4 projects, but it's really, really hard. Back when we were doing it, we could still get Kotaku to write about it once, but never again. It's like, and the one shot was in sort of an unlucky phase when we still were free to play. So that's the press is actually not as powerful. It's social media and it's Kickstarter itself. And for the time, the Kickstarter community, like the guys that back you, they still, as I said, it's a lot of, it's not a financial backing, it's an emotional backing as well. And that's I think the strongest asset actually, because for everybody that backed us and that really liked us, I don't care whether they gave £15 or $15 or 50 or 100. They usually brought 2 or 3 guys with them, and they tried to convince them. They went out there and they got, I don't know, Felicia Day to tweet about us, or Will Wheaton. They just got out there and tried to do stuff, and it's like a sort of collective horse race where you're the horse and the public at the same time, because everybody's like betting on you, but they're really cheering you on. They're trying to help you win the race, and that's quite an important factor. It's very, for that short time period, it's very emotional for them as well.
Okay, we're going to come to questions in a moment, so start thinking of any question you might want to ask. So if on the last bit of this, if you could pick your top couple of tips, having been through the firestorm, come out the other end in your case, just about to come out the other end in case of Tangiers, what would you say your top tips are for people going into this? Was it not bother, or if you're going to bother, this is what you've got to do? What would you say your top tips are?
Prepare, put yourself into it completely, and communication and transparency. Those would be the main points for...
When you say throw yourself into it completely, you mean like you can't do this as a half?
No, if you're just going to it in your evenings, then you will miss out on so much. Even if you did hit it, you'd probably miss out on 4 times of what you could have taken easily.
So and that's interesting, because you had people in the US dealing with the support at that point, on that communication point. How were you dealing with the time difference?
It's quietened down now, so that overnight we'll only get 5 backers. But at the start of the campaign, where there were times when we'd get sort of 3,000, 2,000 an hour, we were working shifts around.
So you actually built a shift plan amongst the team?
Not so much a shift plan, but the 2 of us are working in my bedroom. So I'd collapse on the bed behind while Posh Mike was up at the computer typing away thank yous, and then swap over. Right.
Because you've mentioned, I'll come to your top tips in a moment, but you mentioned before when we chatted about this, that that initial launch and that end point, and I've seen some Kickstarter crowdfunding stats which say the bulk of the money you take is that initial bit and that end bit, which makes the fact that your start bit went so badly such a great success to come in at the end. So yeah, is that borne out?
Actually, I haven't seen a Kickstarter yet, and there might be some out there, but the vast majority is going to be the first 2 days, and every other day is going to be percentage of that. So if you've got 100,000 the first day, and you're going to make 10,000 like for the next couple of days, and then towards the end it's going to rise, and that depends on whether you've already reached your level or not. There's a different sort of dynamic in it. But by and large, I haven't seen a Kickstarter that's managed to sort of hold that initial suspension and initiative and dynamic across, I don't know, the first week even. And that doesn't matter whether it's a 10 million Kickstarter, it's a 10,000 Kickstarter. They're all the same, or mostly the same in that respect. And we sort of clawed our way back. We had a good first day, then we had a very bad second day, mediocre third day, and then we changed our business model, and and we've really fought an uphill battle. And in the last 2 days, we've got about 1/3 of the total. At that stage, if we had gone another day, we probably would have gone, I don't know, 150,000 over or something. It's like the last day has a dynamic that's all in itself. Miraculously, people hop on the bandwagon and decide. A lot of people are on the sidelines and decide to either up their pledge. That's something that's also one of coming to the top tips already. The pledge level. Initially, people go in low. A lot of people go in low or very high because they just fully believe in it. Getting people from $15 to $50 is worth a lot. And these are the guys that already believe you halfway. You know, they were willing to risk a bit of money. They like the project. They may like you. You know, these are the easiest people to convert to a higher level. You just need to find the stuff that's interesting to them. You know, why should they pay more? But that's also something that a lot of people neglect. They sort of collect the guys they've got, and then they just get new guys. That's how the big projects work.
So is that where the feedback and communication, so if you're getting communication from people saying, yeah, I sort of like the project, well, can you do this? And a lot of people asking, you decide to do that, and then you basically mail back to the people you've got saying, we're now doing this thing, but we'd appreciate you to up your pledge. You just ask them?
I actually, we went ahead and said, okay guys, like for example, there's a certain character class or archetype, which is popular in some Shadowrun circles, and we initially didn't want to do that because there's a lot of animation involved. It's sort of a kung fu guy. We said, okay, it's going to be a lot of animation, it's going to cost more than the average other characters, and it's not really worth it because it's not adding to the gameplay. People said, we want that, and I said, guys, it's going to cost us 100,000 or 80,000 at that time, I think. You know, if we get those 80, we're going to do it. But we need everybody to bring up more money, because otherwise it's just not possible for us. And we explained it and we showed it to people, like how much does it cost, why does it cost that much, and then people went, okay, put my money where my mouth is. I want that guy, so here's your extra money. And we raised good 50,000 on that, and we're still going to do it because we said we wanted to. But it's something that surely is important in that sense to make people understand, because if you're not a game developer, you don't have an idea how much it costs to make a game. People think that like giving Chris Roberts 10 million will make the game possible that he's promising. No, it's going to cost him 80 to 100 easily. There's no way he's ever going to make that on that amount of money. But of course, everybody thinks he's got 10 million. That's so much money. He's able to make the game. And there's that. And people can't know. I mean, why should they? So it's important to explain it, and it's important to be honest and open. But again, transparency, I think, is especially if you're not a major and if you don't have a big name, transparency and honesty is about the only thing you can give in that regard.
So what the quick one then, just quickly, your top tip then. So the top tip around.
Okay, beat Tim Schafer. That's one. That's the best way to
do it.
It's because he's actually managed to do like the next one he did after the first one is going. I've got more people in the studio and they need to be paid. That's his pitch, and it's also a game. That's basically his first pitch. He's getting 3 million for that. But that's it. I mean, if you look at the amount of money, like all the big guys get numbers that you can never dream of. Like, just don't think you got in Kickstarter and get 10 million. Nobody does that. The next best thing is either a license or a sort of connection to something that already exists and people have nostalgia for. Because then they pay for the dream and not for the reality, and they pay more for a dream than for reality. If you've got a reality, it's a hard sell. So then the next one is originality. And funnily enough, Kickstarter things are supposed to be about you and the team and original creative ideas, and I don't think it is. It is in the minor leagues and also where we are, because we're sort of lucky to get that license. We're really minor league in that regard. The big money is somewhere else. If you've got a great idea and you've got a good community and a lot of hard work, you may be able to get to a point where you can finance a 2, 3, 4 man team. Beyond that, I don't see how anybody could get enough money. It's really, really rare for anybody to get 100, 150, 200 without having famous names, famous license, or reference to famous license.
Right. Okay.
And a really well-made video. Really, really well-made video. That's the next thing. If whatever you do, whatever your idea is, Kickstarter in their guide will tell you, talk about yourself. Show yourself to the people. If you're not really, really attractive, or really funny, don't do it. It doesn't make sense. They're not gonna buy you. They're gonna buy your product, your game, your idea. So be there, so they see that you're a creator and you're authentic. But talk about your idea, make a video about your idea, make them able to visualize as best as possible to do that, and do it in the first 15 seconds, because 80% of the people are not going to watch until second 30. So if you've got a 9-minute Kickstarter video, again, unless you're Tim Schafer, who's funny on video, rarely anybody will ever see the end of it. And if you think you present yourself, a lot of people did that because Kickstarter told them to. For the first 2 minutes, they go about, hi, this is me, I'm Jan, I'm from Austria or some other country you can't remember, and I'm doing a game. And already I've lost 80% of my community, and they don't know what my game is about that they're supposed to finance. But they still switched off. And that's just no use. So first 30 seconds in any video is reserved for your game. And then you can wave.
What advice have you got for much more modest aims, like on a smaller scale, that perhaps isn't a career move, but something like a project you really want to get out there? I mean, do we have to quit our day job just to do something maybe more modest but still exists? Or, I mean, is that level of commitment always vital?
It's pretty much the same way. Yes, 500 people are less annoying than 5,000 people in terms of quantity, but if you only answer them in the evening, they're still going to feel very left alone. Because if you really love your project and you ask them to really love your project and you can't bother to answer them within 24 hours because it's sort of a weekend thing for you, it doesn't show the level of commitment that I would want from anybody who's asking for my money before he actually puts anything on the table. What's happening with the rest of the project now you've got the money? Are you going to do it as a weekend job as well? Do you even care about your project? Why should I give you money to not care about your project? It's people are demanding. So I think it's a lot of work. And the other thing is you're still competing with more professional projects. No matter whether it's a film or it's a video or it's an exhibition, you're competing with a lot of professional projects.
I walked out of my job to prepare and launch the Kickstarter, which I couldn't have done otherwise. And smaller projects it can be a funny one, because recently I've watched a fairly well-known genre band do a Kickstarter for pressing CDs of their next album. And they've always been in the alternative charts in the top 20. But with this Kickstarter, they struggled to get past £2,500 in a 28-day period, despite having a very sizable audience and being festival headliners, because they did it as a thing on the side rather than throw themselves into it completely.
Well, I actually have a couple of questions which are kind of tied together. The first one is, say I'm doing a creative project of some sort, again, a small one. For instance, I'm doing a deck of cards, yes. How much do I need to bring into the Kickstarter before I start to show people? Does it just have to be, enough to show them that it looks pretty, or do I actually have to have some physical, artwork that I've already invested in that I can convince people that I've made so they would give me money? And the second half of this same question is, ethically, is it fine to count in the sum that I need to raise the money I've already invested pre-Kickstarter to produce the materials I need to convince people to give me money?
We didn't do that. We didn't factor in the amount of money, which is a mistake, I think, from a commercial standpoint, because that's what it cost you. You've paid with your lifetime. You've paid with not getting a job or not keeping your job. We've paid with 4, 5, 6 people fully occupied there. So you should factor that in. You also should factor in a couple of other things. The money that you get from Kickstarter, 10% is going to go away, because it's going to Amazon and Kickstarter. You're probably going to get taxed if you make any sort of money out of whatever you do. There's ways to get around that, but if you're an average person living in the country where your Kickstarter is happening, at the end of the year, somebody's going to want taxes from you. So that's another, 15-20% off. What you want is, you want people to look at your physical swag, or whatever it's called, the stuff that you give in return other than the project itself, which sort of the extra deck of cards, the hand-signed deck of cards. Always have an image for that. Don't tell them what it's, show don't tell. That's sort of an old adage in the gaming industry, but that's really important. You need to show what people can expect. A picture says more than 1,000 words and all that. Same thing for the video, for the graphics. You don't need a physical deck of cards unless it's really important. Like the physicality is really important. If there's a haptic addition to them, you need to make people be able to understand what's happening there. So after you've done all that and you've produced your physical stuff, that's usually about, depending on your project, the amount of swag, it's about 10 to 20%. You're left with 50% of the sum. You really only get half the money to spend on the project. And if you then have a small project and you've already invested 3 months in it prior, you probably want to factor that in. Because otherwise, you might actually have a zero-sum game there. The Kickstarter has an additional value because it's marketing. It's the greatest marketing you can get. It's people that believe in you and what you do, telling other people that it's great. Like this is what marketers pay top dollar for if they can get it. Believe in the product. But it's still, if you're calculating conservatively, I would definitely factor that in, especially on small projects.
Do you want to say a quick one on this, or we'll go to the next
one? In the first point, when it comes to presenting either just the idea or a tangible product, it's all about convincing the backer that it can actually happen, that it's something they want, because with every backer, when they see a project, there's going to be a risk-reward calculation that they make on the product. And the more you have there to say that this can happen, the more likely they are to not only put money down, but to increase it.
Okay. Yeah, and your question.
Sort of trying to learn a bit of a lesson from the self-publishing, in that, of course, lots of people focus on the success stories, and actually the guys up here are successful as well, which is great. But actually, what do you see as the top things that people mess up with their Kickstarters? A lot of Kickstarters don't succeed, so what do you think it is that, obviously they don't do the things you're saying, but actually are there things they do, they're not fully invested, they're not communicating, but actually what other screw-ups do they make that stop people backing?
That's a really good question, because I think I read some stats recently that Indiegogo, somebody looked at some stats and 80% of the projects on Indiegogo failed to get to their target. Although that said, Indiegogo does have the option for you to take the money even if it doesn't meet the target, so maybe that's a factor in it. But yeah, I think it's a really good question. What do you see people doing that doesn't work?
Failing to prepare, getting the reward tiers wrong, getting the amount they want wrong, messing up the promo video, not putting enough information in, not being able to convince people. They're all things you can get by looking at other projects that have succeeded, and there's quite an obvious gulf on failed projects, or a lot of failed projects, where that hasn't happened.
Yeah. Putting too much information in. It's also something that's a problem. If you're going on 10 pages about your project, nobody's going. 8 of 10, self-publishing, 8 out of 10 fail. It's the same for Kickstarter, 8 out of 10 fail. I think the one thing you need to be aware of in doing a Kickstarter is you're doing it for the first time. The guys backing you probably have 10, 20, 15, whatever amounts of projects backing. They are actual Kickstarter pros. Like in terms of the customers, they're very well educated. They can organize people around them because they know them from other Kickstarters. They have an expectation, a level of quality, level of commitment from other Kickstarters. So while you're doing the first time, the customer that you're talking to is a pro. And there's a lot of time people think, I'm fresh here, so everybody else is fresh here, and then they get kicked in the face from people that aren't fresh and that seem insulted, or that say this other Kickstarter is doing the same thing as you, but it's doing so much better. So this is, I think, that's also very important. Otherwise, what you said, really try, and I'm rambling on, I'm sorry for that, but Kickstarter, try to be concise. Really get the first top page. It's the same as with Google. Like the first 3 hits work. Nobody's interested in number 10. If something below the fold, nobody reads it. There's so many projects I've seen where people desperately try to explain every nook and cranny of their idea, and I'm just going like, what the hell are you talking about? I've stopped listening 1 minute into it. Small, short, sharp, and as much imagery as you can get.
Okay. Well, we're going to have to draw it in to a close there. I want to thank Jan and Alex, and also the Wellcome Trust, so thank you very much.